Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Football Kentron, the only English language podcast dedicated to Armenian football. I'm your host, Adam, and I am joined here by my lovely co-hosts, Charles and Armen. How are you gentlemen doing?
I don't know how to answer that question because there's, I'm a bit scared, not gonna lie, a bit scared.
There is a lot to discuss, a lot to cover as usual, and this is my favorite time of the year, when the national team camp comes back. But before we get into any of that, let us begin domestically in Armenia. Pyunik have won the Armenian Premier League title. They edged out Urartu in the final match of the season and have officially clinched the title on 74 points. Ararat Armenia, who are 3 points behind them and have a game in hand, still cannot win the title because of a head-to-head with Pyunik. Pyunik was successful in all of their meetings this season, and they take the title. And not only do they take the title, they take the only Champions League spot. So really, great season. I mean, seeing two teams finish in the 70s for points is insane. I don't think that's ever been done. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think this has ever happened before, where two teams were able to get that many points in the league. Just to run down the list for you guys, Pyunik's in first place, Ararat Armenia in second, Alashkert in third, edging out to Ararat Yerevan in fourth on 46 points, followed by Noah, Urartu, Noravan, Kvan, and Bekma in the bottom place. It's yet to be known whether or not Bekma are actually going to be relegated, but we'll get into once we have a little bit more information. But Armen, speaking of information, we got a little bit more information on Noravan, right?
Yes, I was muted. Okay. But yes, we do. Apparently, Noravan wasn't accepted into their UEFA license under the supposed reason that they are not in existence for more than 3 years, which is, I don't want to use the wrong words here because it's unfair. Being real, it's unfair because you guys mentioned from time to time how UEFA changes their rules and their whole systems constantly, especially when it comes to UEFA Nations League, but not only, as we see here, because on the one hand, Noravan is supposedly forbidden from European football because of this reason that they don't exist for more than 3 years or 3 years or more, or whatever. But a couple of years ago, FCAA, Ararat Armenia, everyone remembers, they basically became champions on their first season at the APL, and they weren't even barely 2 years into existence. And I think they became APL champions twice in a row, and they did play European playoffs. Of course, later on they went on to lose both times. At the very final round on penalties after dominating, and then it was a massive cold feet case both times. But that's not the thing. The problem is the hypocrisy or the double standards or changes in ruling or whatever. Sadly for Noravan, they can't get into Europe. I mean, everyone wanted them to go into Europe, and they are not. This means, you know what this means, though?
Yes,
yeah.
There's a difference in allocation now. So because of the whole Russia thing happening, our cup winner was supposed to start in the Conference League second round. But now because...
would have been Noravan.
It would have been Noravan. But now because that's not the case, apparently what's going to happen now, as of now, is Ararat Armenia, who are in second place, is going to be awarded the Conference League second round start.
In my opinion, that's a silver lining. Of course.
Yeah, because I didn't anticipate Noravan. I anticipated them crashing out immediately. But you know what?
I mean, realistically, whatever Noravan could have made, we really don't know. Maybe they would have shocked everyone. I don't know. But realistically speaking, and on paper, Ararat Armenia has a much better chance of making European group stages.
Yes, and there's also a benefit to other clubs. Now, Alaşkert and Ararat, who are in fourth place, are actually going to get the two Conference League first round berths. So Ararat, who slipped up and lost that third place position to Alaşkert, are now rewarded.
Yeah, because of these complications.
But from what we understand, Noravank is suing, and they're taking this to the Court of Arbitration. So we'll keep you all posted on that as soon as we know more. But speaking of Ararat Armenia, there seems to be some rumors of some managerial changes. Charans, what's going on by the vice champions?
They're very likely going to appoint Vartan Bichakcan, who was the Ararat Yerevan coach. Last year, he led them to Europe. Am I right? He was the manager for against that high intense game of many goals being scored.
Yeah, you're right.
It was like
they beat Fehervar, aka
yeah, it was that team. There you go.
90s.
Yeah.
And they then later on almost beat the Polish.
Yeah.
I don't remember the name of that team.
I think it was I don't know. I'll remember it. Anyway, go.
A lot of W's and a lot of C's and S's
and
Z's.
Vorklav?
Vorklav.
Yeah.
Baklava.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, baklava işte.
And then the thing is, there's going to be a reunion for this because there's the central midfield partners of Udo and Muratyan, who are his favorite players. He coached in Chirac, Gümrü, and Ararat Yerevan. And, reunion in football is something that many people love to see. So this is becoming more likely and likely.
Yeah, I think this only furthers, our hope of having two teams in Europe, because Bichakcan, we think, domestically speaking, I think we've said this before, we think he's the best coach, and you give him the resources and the players that Ararat Armenia have, and I think we'll see a very, very good outcome. Not to mention the rumors that a lot of the foreign players, I think there was a list of 8 or so, will no longer be with the club. So, and we know Bichakcan likes to take a very Armenian-centric approach, and we, of course, are fully supportive of that one. Any other notes or thoughts to add to that, boys, before we move on?
No, just very, very excited if it happens. I mean, if they do appoint Coach Vatan, it would be super exciting. I mean, it would be kind of like a return to the basis for FCAA.
Agreed. Well,
yeah, they're gonna go into Conference League. Hopefully, they go through it a lot. And since we're saying about Conference League, Henrikh Mkhitaryan is the first champion of the Conference League in history.
Yes. He is not only
AS Roma.
So he's not only in the team that won the first ever UEFA Europa Conference League. He's also one of 2 players, him and Chris Smalling, the 2 only players who have won both the Europa League and the Conference League, which is pretty cool.
And Jose Mourinho.
And Jose Mourinho is actually the first manager to win all 3. He won the Champions League, he's won the Europa League, and he's won the Conference League. So
my name is Jose Mourinho.
He's obviously, congratulations to Henrikh. He's the most decorated Armenian player, and he's only adding to that. But now questions have risen onto his future with a potential move to Inter Milan.
Yeah, Romano reported this as well yesterday.
Yeah, Fabrizio Romano reported it, and maybe by the time this episode comes out, there might be some sort of resolution to this. I'm assuming there will be. So you'll probably know if you're listening to this in the future.
I'm just hoping for Romano one day to report about Barseghyan.
Maybe this summer, if he does well in the national team camp, which is the next topic of conversation.
Our flow in this episode is just, wow.
Unparalleled. The Armenian National Team has called up a roster to compete in the UEFA Nations League. Now, as a reminder, the UEFA Nations League is taking part this year. We have a set of 4 matches in the month of June and 2 matches in September. As a reminder, our group includes the Republic of Ireland, Scotland, and the Ukraine. Big group, tough group. We're in the big time. I think saying League B is definitely, I would consider that to be the big time.
We're expecting this.
And they took a lot of work to get here. Of course, the winning of the previous Nations League campaign, or that game against Macedonia and in Nicosia, and gaining promotion. I remember that whole huge emotional thing. So we're finally in a space where we're going to be playing competitively against teams that are theoretically supposed to be around our level, but as we all know, these teams are very, very good teams. So let's just go through the squad really quickly, Armin and Chadens. We'll start with you, Armin. What goalkeepers and defenders were called up for Armenia?
Well, I don't know if this is necessarily good news. Goalkeepers are 4. Yurchenko, David Yurchenko, recently champions with Pyunik, starting goalkeeper. Great goalie even at this age. He will be starting. But the second string goalkeeper will be disputed between Henrikh Mkhitaryan from Urartu, finalist in the Armenian Cup, Henrikh Mkhitaryan from Noravank, champions in the Armenian Cup. We've talked about him last show because he's had a great final in the Cup. And lastly, and hopefully leastly, Stanislav Buchnev from FC Pyunik, David Yurchenko's sub at club level. I'm going to elaborate on this later on, but let's go on to the defenders. Luckily for everyone, and I think this makes everyone equally happy, Captain El Capitan Varastat Haroyan is back, baby, from his injury. The Cadiz center back is finally back. He's going to be joined by Daron Voskanian, Haik Ishkhanian, Henrikh Mkhitaryan, and Stjopa Mkhitaryan. All of these are the center backs. Jordi Ararat, who can play center back and full back. Girar Markarian, our boy. Gamo Hovhannisyan, Johannes Hampartsumian, and lastly, Arman Hovhannisyan, one of the captains of FC Pyunik, Armenian Premier League champions, as fullbacks. A lot of options here. A lot to discuss, but let's go on to the midfielders where things get a little bit good.
Chadens, midfield and attack. Let us know who has been called up.
Midfield. Let's begin with Wobemar Angulo. Atak Grigorian, Mkhitaryan, Udo, Harutyunyan, Malakian, and our boy, our young talent, Spertian. In attack, we have Khorem Bayramian coming from Russia, Zelarayan with Vahan Bichakchan, Barseghyan, Babayan, which Armin did not notice, and Seropian with Dashan, and our league winner, Adamyan.
Okay, so boys, as we always do, we break down the squad and we give our thoughts and opinions and players that we feel have missed out on and can improve upon this squad. This squad is clearly far from perfect. In terms of defense, I think midfield and attack, there can be improvements, but definitely a lot better than when we're looking at the back line. So let's just start with goalkeepers really quickly. We have Yurchenko, Beglaryan, Avagyan, and Buchnev. Now, kind of doesn't make sense to me to call up Buchnev. It never does because he's not good. But secondly, also because he's a backup to Yurchenko who never plays. So other options that are out there is, of course, our BFF Felix Verayan, who plays for HoFK in Finland, who actually just had a start in the cup and kept his third clean sheet now in his all 3 appearances that he's had so far in Finland.
I mean, 3 official and another friendly. All 4 games, official or not, clean sheets.
Yeah, so I think he's a player that's definitely overlooked, I would say. Someone that should have probably been called instead of Bushnev. Barseghyan, again, he's not that good. I think you're better off maybe calling
but
one.
His form is just bad. He had potential 5 years ago, but he wasted that, and you can't reward that.
Exactly. And then we have Avagyan, who I actually approve of this call-up. Not because, Noravank in the league, obviously not so hot, but he has had some very good performances lately, and his performance in the cup final against Urartu was very, very good.
Yeah.
He made some great saves.
He's proven that, in my opinion, that when things get tough, he can rise up to the challenge, which is important.
And he's also very good with his feet, which is, we know, is a criteria that Joaquin Caparros actually looks for when selecting goalkeepers. Moving on to the problematic part of the pitch. Mainly, we could talk about central defense because I think that's where a bulk of the issues that we see come from. So just to recap, we have Haroyan, Voskanian, Ishkhanian, Mkhitaryan, and Mkhitaryan. So obviously, El Capitan, Haroyan, he's there. But big name missing here, guys. Andre Kalisier, who, of course, is injured. He was injured in the warm-up before
against Montenegro,
and he has not recovered.
Actually, thanks to that, we noticed. We discovered Stiopa was actually ready.
Ready with an asterisk. I don't think he's completely ready, but I don't think he had a choice.
I mean,
yeah.
I think he's ready because the Norway game was a collective mistake. It wasn't an individual thing. I mean, it was just wrong that game. So I wouldn't count the Norway game.
And then against Montenegro, he played really good, but again, 2 stupid yellow cards and he got sent off.
Undeserved. But, I mean, neither of them were a foul. If anything, you could scold him just because he kind of was naive, but neither of them were fouls. But neither were dirty plays.
In his positioning, his instinct, his tackling, all great. He's huge, which is very rare for us. So his aerial presence was very good, and partnering him up with Haroyan was honestly great. I mean, I'm not even
speaking of huge and like tall and built and all of that strength, physical strength that Vato and Stiopa have. We have some overlooked players that would add to that, and not because of and they're not less talented because of that.
Yeah, because the other call-ups are Voskanian, who hasn't played a single minute in 3 months because he had torn his his ankle muscle or something? A muscle in his ankle. So he literally, I don't know how this guy was called up. That call-up makes 0 sense. The guy has not played a second.
In September, we're getting called up too.
Yeah, that's at this rate.
We're getting called up too, you'll see.
Ishkhanian, who is old, not good.
I could see that one. No, I mean...
But again, he plays in the worst defense in the league. Beckma's the worst defense in the league.
But it's the young team. I mean, it's a team where 8 players have to be under 23, because of a rule. So it's not his fault. I never really disliked Ishkhanian. I mean, of course, there are better options than him, but all things considered, and as we're going to talk about, say, Voskanian and Mkhitaryan, I think Ishkhanian is better, and it's not such a bad call-up.
Yeah, I think as a 4th or 5th string, I'm fine with it. But as in competing with Mkhitaryan and Voskanian, I mean, I'd much rather obviously have him start, but we know what the pecking order looks like, and we know that Voskanian is for some reason number 3. And I don't understand it. I know we've said this time and time again, but he literally gives away a penalty or is the direct cause of a goal almost every single game he plays. So I'm not. Again, I'm just failing to understand how this guy is qualified to even be a professional because he's that
but
bad.
we all know he's gonna start.
Yeah. Anyway, so other options we had picked out here is the defensive duo from Noah, Artur Kartashian and Henrikh Mkhitaryan, who the latter of which has had a very, very good second half of the season, including like 7 clean sheets or something.
Both joined the team in the second half of the season.
That's true. But I think Mkhitaryan has been better. Kartashian has had some big mistakes.
Yeah.
He's given away some penalties. He's been clumsy.
Plus the expectation thing. Mkhitaryan came from abroad. No one really with some fitness issues.
Yeah.
Even said mentioned by himself, like he talked about those, and no one really knew how he was gonna perform. And wow, it was just surprisingly good.
Yeah, and so those two, I think, are players that could have easily replaced Voskanyan and Mkhitaryan because Mkhitaryan
long overdue. They should have been already like in the last call up in the friendly window, and I don't know what. It's really disrespectful by now.
Yeah, and then another big looming question mark and thing that has clearly been a mistake every single time it's been done, yet it keeps on being done, is calling Kamo as a defender, which they have done so again. And we've seen every single time Kamo has played left back, we've performed.
Can you believe he's got 70 caps?
It doesn't make any sense to me. Again, like I said, when we play an actual left back, Margaryan, we play really well. When we play Kamo at left back, we play very bad. And it doesn't take a professional or a coach to see that. It like doesn't.
Yeah.
The average person can look at this and see that he's not a left back.
Exactly. Kamo's only virtue is his pace, and he's a 30, if I'm not mistaken. Like
if Kamo starts at left back, I genuinely think Cap should be fired. I genuinely think so because there's no way you can make that same mistake that many times and get away with it. Because it literally
this episode just went. Oh,
he should. I genuinely believe so. I genuinely believe it because you don't deserve to coach a team if you don't understand that guy is not a fullback.
But look, Kamo has 70 caps. I don't think it's got something to do with the coach. I think it goes beyond that. I mean,
I'm not saying don't play him. I'm saying don't play him at left back. Play him as a sub
again
for like the wing. I agree with that. I would want him to do that because that's what he does for his club, and he does a really good job when he plays right midfield. But he's not a left back.
True.
It's like getting to the point of ridiculousness.
That's our national team sometimes for you.
It's a circus, right? The rest of the fullback call-ups I'm okay with. I do think Derderian not being called up was a big question mark. But I also think that comes down to the fact that Gunko at Ararat Armenia dropped him for Alamal for no reason, which again led to their title loss.
And in time, that is weird.
Yeah, that one didn't make any sense to me. But again, I'm very confident in Jordi Ararat's abilities. Obviously, Hovhannes Barseghyan, he's amazing. I know he can perform. And then Arman Hovhannesyan, he's okay, but he's also shown that in big pressure, big matches, he fucks up. So I don't know.
I don't know, man. He played against Georgia and Macedonia, both defining games when we won the Nations League.
Yeah, but interestingly
enough, I really
enough,
like him as a second string.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. We'll see what happens there. So moving on to the midfield, we have Angulo, Grigorian, Mkhitaryan, Udo Harutyunyan, Edgar Malakian, and Eduard Svertsyan. Interesting.
By the way, the Mkhitaryan is Rudik Mkhitaryan. For those who don't know him, for many, it's kind of
a question mark.
Unknown, question mark, a huge question mark. But trust us, he's good. He's just unproven yet. He's just inexperienced. But he's young, and he's the starting defensive mid, and this is important. He's a defensive mid with defensive capabilities, which is going to lead us later on in the show to the question mark about how we're going to approach this formations and the tactics. But he is a good player with a lot to prove and a lot to show.
Yeah, and it's to me an encouraging sign, even though Angulo is in this squad. It's an encouraging sign to me that that there is a possibility, and he will, considering we have 4 games, he's probably going to start a game. And to me, it looks pretty divided. We have Angulo, Grigorian, and Mkhitaryan as the defensive midfielders, and we have Udo, Harutyunyan, Malakian as the ball-playing central midfielders.
Exactly. I mean, for once, bro, 1 second. For once, we have, after a year, more than one defensive mid called up. After a year and 9 winless games.
So I have a question, and I think Chadens, you might be able to answer this one. So we have Barseghyan, who's been playing as a central midfielder, right, alongside the defensive midfielder. That's kind of how the game plan's been going at the national team. But now we have, it looks like a 6 central midfielders with a good balance. 3 defensive midfielders, 3 central midfielders.
Yeah, baby.
Where does Barseghyan fit in this?
You know what it does.
I'm thinking of a potential system change.
Okay.
I mean, it's kind of hard, but I'm thinking that like there might actually be a change regarding the formation a bit. I'm positive there will be 1 or 2 games that there will be a different formation that we have seen before. If we currently play 4-4-2 or 4, not too much 4-2-3-1, we don't play that too much, but it's likely it's going to be a mixture of 4-2-3-1 with a maybe even 4-3-3. I don't know, possible. It's kind of tough to play with 4-3-3, but there's a lot of variation. There's a lot of variations to that formation.
Let's talk about that for a minute. So we know that during the last friendly window, Joaquin Caparros said that he is going to use these as direct trials of different tactical setups for these Nations League games. He confirmed that playing against Montenegro was supposed to simulate playing against Ireland, and we played a 4-4-2. And we're assuming, because that's the case, that Norway is supposed to mirror more of Scotland or Ukraine. Probably more realistically, I don't know, which one would it be more realistically, Armen, you think? You think Norway was meant to emulate Ukraine, maybe? Yeah. Because they have a tall, physical, quick striker in Yarmolenko?
Yeah. First and foremost, I would have said, without having analyzed Ireland like this time 3 months ago, I would have thought on paper Montenegro is going to be a lot like Ireland. But the thing is, we have analyzed Ireland a little bit more when the date came, which is now. And by now we know that actually Ireland plays a very different style. And we were talking about this right before we hopped on the show. Ireland has been playing a very different style than what they traditionally did in history. Much more open, much closer to our actual game style. I'm talking about Armenians, of course. And on the other hand, Montenegro doesn't. So that's going to be tough to equate and to reflect and to compare when it comes to what we did against Montenegro. We're probably not going to be able to do against Ireland. On the other hand, I think Norway does compare a little bit more realistically to both Scotland and Ukraine. And the good thing here is Cap seems to have learned from the mistake he did on that game against Norway, which was not playing a defensive mid. And he called not just 1, but 3 defensive mids this time. Hopefully he plays them, of course, but and hopefully not Angulo. But I would say a fully fit Artak Grigorian would be perfect to go with, I don't know, Udo, most likely.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, when he gets tired, which of course he will, he's 34, you sub him at the 60th minute or so for Rudik, who's a beast and is young.
Yeah, and I think that type of willingness to rotate is going to be key. If he is like, being stupid about it and he plays Grigorian for a full 90 minutes, we can anticipate. Yeah, that would be crazy. I would never do that. You would want to sub these players off. And I think looking at who we have in the midfield, I mean, again, I wouldn't be opposed to starting Angulo against Ireland and then 60 minutes bringing on Mkhitaryan, who is more of an anchored defensive midfielder, and then taking off, I don't know, Udo for Harutyunyan to give more of a attacking kick, or bringing in Malakian if the game is looking like it's getting really physical, and those are the type of things that we need to see, because we're not in, we're not playing Estonia, we're not playing Georgia, we're not playing Macedonia, we're playing Ireland, Scotland, and Ukraine. We're playing teams that are going to bring
small components count now.
I mean, I would say that Ireland is not that different from from Macedonia and Georgia. Don't underestimate those two.
I would say closer to Georgia. I mean, closer to Macedonia. I wouldn't put Georgia near them, to be honest. I don't think Georgia has yet demonstrated their full potential. I do think we're a better team.
But they
do
have that potential, and they didn't show it against us. They could have.
Well, they could have, but they didn't. So there's, again, at the end of the day, the results are what matters, and the result was Armenia got promoted. So
and the thing is, back then we were doing what we were supposed to do. Then we went on to a whole year, 12 months or so, even more maybe, of not doing things right, and we were an oracle. We called it every single time, and results shown that. And the good thing I would say that is, it seems to be that on paper, the coaching staff seems to have learned from their mistakes. This is a good sign. I mean, of course, could have been better. There shouldn't, some players shouldn't be there and should be replaced. But overall, I think it's a good sign.
Yeah, I do too. But here's the question though. I think one thing we have noticed is that Joaquin Caparros is very methodical in his approach to games, and he's made it very clear that he does pre-planned changes to his tactics going into a game, and he hasn't necessarily demonstrated that he's able to make changes on the fly that can affect games. We're yet to see that from him, and that's the thing that kind of is preventing me from getting a little too excited for this, because yes, we do have the personnel, but if the game isn't going his way, he's not the type of person to change his pre-planned changes,
Look, one quick counter to that, I would have thought you were right, but then it popped to my mind that against Macedonia in the 2020 Nations League, basically the final, the last game that was a final, realistically, he started Henrikh Mkhitaryan, the Urartu captain, and who is of course key at Urartu, but back then he was also a very important member of the national team, and Caparros saw a lot of potential in him, which he still does, but later on he went on not to call him because of what I'm gonna mention. Hagopian got injured mid-game, and that was really unexpected for all of us. And really, I mean, seriously speaking, genuinely, the ball was going through him on every play, and it's not like he was at 10 or at central mid. He was slightly to the left. It was a 4-3-3, and he was slightly left midfielder. But every single ball, he was key in the passing, in the build-up, and then he went on to get injured, and then we changed our whole game style to a more counter-attacking style in the second half, And then came, everyone remembers Ioannis Ampartsoumian's goal by now. It was from a counter. So I think Cup is very capable of adapting to changes when they are unexpected.
I hope you're right, because I just think there are some things that we've seen that still are kind of surprising to me. And I think another example of that is playing Barseghyan in central midfield. I understand his rationale behind it.
Wrong.
I get it. I totally get why he does it, because he is one of the best passers on this team. His vision is great, but I just think you're giving him too much defensive responsibility and not letting him be the free-flowing attacker he needs to be. You're not getting the most out of him.
You can see the logic, but it was predictable that he was going to get caught up in defense from time to time. And it is predictable that Barseghyan is not fit for defensive duties. And then it has to be a very much weaker side than yours who you can do whatever you want to against. And neither of these teams is that.
Exactly. So I wouldn't, if I see him in central midfield, I understand why he's there, but I just think you're underutilizing him. Yeah. So moving on to the attack, where we have several players, including a surprise call-up, I would say, in Adamyan, who is a 31-year-old former national team player.
I don't think he's a striker, though.
He is a right winger, actually, and he's
super balanced. He has played everywhere, bro, from the middle of the pitch to the striking point. He has played literally anywhere. He's very versatile in that sense.
He's very versatile, but also kind of concerning that they would call him up instead of a very fit, young, talented, and available Arthur Galoyan, who was actually announced, as we had mentioned in our previous episode, with this whole video and announcement thing with the FFA and a press release and all these things, that he was going to be playing for the national team, and he doesn't get called up, but instead Adamyan gets called up. A little confusing and weird, right?
Yeah, confusing point mostly because of what you said, the video, the introduction video and everything we mentioned on our last show. Go listen to it if you want more information on Arthur. He's a great player with a lot of future. Everyone would have thought that he would have been called. But look, Adamyan is very versatile. I think that's what he was going for. He's experienced. He comes off 2 seasons in Kazakhstan, which is a pretty much better league, realistically, than the APL. And upon his return, he was key to Pyunik's rotation to become champions. I could see why he was called up, and I think that in the attack, like from the central midfielders and attacking midfielders up, I think the call-up was spot on.
I agree. I really like the fact that we have about 6 players, 7 very capable players that are going to be rotating between 4 spots. You have the 2 wings and the 2 strikers. So you have Adamyan, Barseghyan, Babayan, Serobian, who are going to be those 4 wingers, and then you have Zarayan, Bichakyan, Adamyan, and Adamyan, who are going to be the front 2. That's kind of the way that I'm seeing that this is probably going to pan out. Because
and 3 of those are actually, I want to add this because we're talking about versatility like 2 seconds ago. Up front, we have 3 very versatile players that are all 3 of them pretty much wingers, but they're all bullish and built and above 1.85 m tall each. They're all fast-paced. They're basically bulls. We're, of course, talking about Tigran Barseghyan, Edgar Babayan, and recently Belgian champion Sarkis Adamyan. All 3 of them add a lot, and I mean a lot, of versatility to this team.
So looking at Armenia at first, our team, we come off the back of a pretty bad record until this recent win that we had versus Montenegro in the international friendlies. we experienced a winless streak of 9 games. Meanwhile, all 3 of our group opponents come off undefeated streaks. We have 8 for Ireland, 8 for Scotland, and 10 for Ukraine. Of course, that's expected to change with Scotland and Ukraine playing in the World Cup qualifying playoffs, which is going to be the Wednesday of the week that this episode is released. And the winner between them will be playing Wales in the final on Sunday, I believe. So, let's start with Ireland. The Irish national team is a very different looking Irish team than the ones that we had faced in the Euro 2012 campaign. This is a new look, new style Irish national team that is headed by Stephen Kenny, who has made a lot of wholesale changes from what our buddies have told us in the last episode. If you guys haven't done so, check it out. We got a couple Irish podcasters and Twitter accounts, these great young guys who came in and they talked to us a little bit about who Ireland are, how their identity has changed for the better, and what we can expect. So we're just going to be focusing on, in general, their style of play and things that we've noticed from our research. Armen, let's start with you. What are the key characteristics of this newfound Irish national team?
Yes, it's a new phase for Ireland with Stephen Kenny, as our buddies have told us. As I said, one would think that Ireland traditionally plays long balls, crosses, aerial duels, all that style of football, which they pretty much excelled at. Well, not anymore, folks. Apparently, Ireland have been playing a more fast-paced, short-passing kind of football. No more long ball kind of things and attempts and stuff. They are playing much more similar to our style, I would say, as I mentioned. Arguably with a 3-4-3 or a 3-4-2-1, basically, formation with 2 inside attacking midfielders and 2 wide midfielders / fullbacks, which most likely I would say are going to be Seamus Coleman from Everton and the legend himself, James McLean. I really, really like James McLean. What a character. Too bad he's going to be playing us, and hopefully he loses. Other than that, I wish Jimmy McLean a great qualifier, a great Nations League. I mean, other than him, they have some other, key players.
And Chadens, who are those key players? We have a couple of them that our buddies had highlighted, but based on our own research, what did we gather?
We've got Callum Robinson, who plays at West Brom. Josh Cullen, Anderlecht, suspended. Obafemi, he's from Swansea and he's got a good name to himself. The next is Gavin Van Bazunu, who's a goalkeeper with very, very good potential.
Yeah, your boy Kelleher is fighting for that goalie spot with Bazunu.
Yeah, and Bazunu is actually a Manchester City goalkeeper who has been loaned out in the past couple of years, most recently to Portsmouth. But a lot of the different people and Twitter accounts and people that we've just been in contact with talking about the Irish national team have been raving about him. They're saying, this is a guy that has a lot of potential. So he played in League One, which is the 3rd division in England this season, and he made 44 appearances. He conceded 51 goals, and he kept 16 clean sheets, which, isn't that bad. I mean, that's about 33% clean sheets? That's pretty good, I would say. So he's, of course, the level at League One isn't that great. But,
it is.
Kazakhstan isn't either, so...
I mean,
we're not going to argue.
We gotta have some hopes. I mean, it's not Premier League either. That's where he's headed, though. That's where Bazunu is headed. But not yet.
There seems to be a general consensus that he is going to be fighting for one of the 3 first-team goalkeeping spots at Manchester City. So, I mean, yet to be seen what happens over there, but a lot of promise. Their other keeper is Kelleher, who is 23 years old and is the backup keeper at your club, Chadens Liverpool. So I don't know who is going to start in between the sticks, because this guy's played like not at all, I think. He played a couple EFL games, couple FA Cup games. He made a couple Premier League appearances this season. So he didn't play much. He conceded 7 goals in his 8 appearances, and he kept 4 clean sheets. So it's a real toss-up of whoever's in net for them. But I think regardless, we're talking about a decent goalkeeper, because their third option is this guy named Mark Travers, who is the starting goalkeeper for Bournemouth in the Championship. So whoever they have in goal is going to be a good player. They don't have a Bushnev like how we do. Moving forward,
we shouldn't have a Bushnev ourselves either.
Yeah, but for some reason we do.
Exactly. It's not like we have worse choices. We have so much better choices, so many.
Yes. And speaking of choices, the choice of formation for the Irish national team is a 3-4-3 or a 3-4-2-1 formation. So they are pretty reliant on their wing backs, and they like to play 3 at the back. And normally this is a formation that would be used for traditional long ball football, but that's not what Ireland plays anymore. They play a lot of, as Armin mentioned, quick interplay passing, and they're actually looking pretty good. So we've watched a couple of their games. We've looked at some of their goals. We've looked at how they've conceded some goals. Gentlemen, let's start breaking Ireland down a little bit. First, Armin, let's talk about how Ireland, we've talked about how they line up. They have this formation where they have 4 midfielders and 3 attackers at any time. How does that shape actually translate to their style on the pitch?
Well, I would say that, they are a high pressing team, and they kind of leave space. They seem to be leaving a little bit of space when they are attacking at the top of the box, which would be our 3/4 space on the pitch. Attacking midfield territory, which is where our players excel. We have Lucas Elarayan, MLS MVP. In America, we have Edward Spertian, Russian Premier League gem and magician. We have Mkhitaryan, Tigran Barseghyan, so many, And here's the thing. They seem to concede a lot or be a little bit shaky on the long shots. Their goalkeepers are not entirely secure when it comes to long shots. And especially when they underestimate a rival or they play against teams they consider inferior, which would be slightly our case. That's where the key would be for us. And man, do we have arguments to profit of that, capitalize off the long shots. I mean, I could go on because here's where the things get good for us. Look, we have so many players that are basically specialists when it comes to long shots. Edward Spertian, Edgar Babayan, Vahan Mkhitaryan, who else? Tigran Barseghyan and Henrikh Mkhitaryan, all of them have scored actually for the national team from outside the box. Wouldn't that be a key to break down Bazunu and Kelleher challenge?
I sure hope so.
You know Kelleher better than us. How do you break him down? How do you beat him?
I'm not an analyst. You're putting me in a tough position. But look, he's experienced on a much deeper level than most of our players. That's the case with many of their players. In terms of long distance, I could argue that maybe that's not the case as well. Maybe, possibly, it's that using the advantage of hitting counterattacks, because we've got fast players, but also using their depth as an advantage for us. Before I had mentioned about the formations, the 4-4-2 would be a good approach if you have the two strikers going behind those defensive lines. I hope that becomes effective.
I see, because so what you're saying is you have the two strikers keeping the three central defenders busy, and then you have those two Ireland wingbacks that like to make deep runs in behind the defense, and that's going to leave a lot of space on the wings, which that's what we hope that Tigran Barseghyan, Vahan Bichakcan, Eduard Spertian can pick out a pass or make a run and get him behind, right?
Well, depends. So depends on the player who's going to be deployed. That's why, because I personally don't have much faith with Tigran, because Tigran is more of you need one or two next to Tigran to be running. But with Vahan, I'm the most confident with Vahan. Vahan is that kind of player to just sprint, or Shagoyan, but we don't have Shagoyan in this one. So
we have Artur Seropian. He is very much like him and kind of better built physically already.
But he's still only 18 years of age and hasn't had little to
minutes.
You need confidence. You need confidence with someone on the ball to be able to roam and run.
And that's
that's why behind the defensive lines we could become effective. That's my point. I don't know.
So one thing we know about Ireland, though, is that, and just like many teams in the British Isles, they are very organized on attacking set pieces. They are generally taller than we are, and they really love to cross the ball. And that's one thing that Armenia is noticeably awful at defending. We are horrible at.
That's the worst part.
So if we're talking cross completion, Ireland have completed 83 from 194, so they have about a 43% cross accuracy. And if they're left open and not pressed, which, if you have someone like a Como at left back who isn't a left back, you expect to see a lot of spaces. So I think the return of the fun zone is probably going to be happening if these players play, because they're not necessarily ones that are good at cutting out crosses, where I think if we were to talk about Ejiro Margaryan, he's much better at cutting off crosses, as he's done, week in, week out for Ararat Yerevan and for Urartu. I think that's going to be a huge area of importance, defensively speaking, for Armenia.
Yeah, you mentioned Ejiro Margaryan, and when he plays, he's a relief, really, because as you said, he cuts crosses, and he did so wonderfully against no other than Die Mannschaft, Germany. He played a great game, and I remember he had to mark Havertz, and
which is not easy.
Exactly, and Timo Werner, I think, both of them stronger, taller, and faster, and they would actually beat Giroud when it came to pace in the one-on-one runs. But then again, Giroud's positioning allowed Giroud, of course, to recover, kind of. He forced the mistake in some of the best attackers in the world, like Havertz and Werner. He forced them to make mistakes, even though they went faster than him. And then that's how he recovered and cut the crosses. So if he was able to pull that off against the best attackers in the world, I'm more than confident that then if fit, he could perfectly do that against the very fast upcoming Irish attackers too.
Yeah, and so I think crossing is a double-edged sword for Ireland. It's also a large strength of theirs, but it is also a very noticeable weakness of theirs. Crosses and set pieces specifically. We as Armenia, have tried and have attempted a crossing style of play, and I think I've been a vocal criticism of that. Especially, I think if I recall correctly, I think it was the game against Liechtenstein, our 1-1 draw, where we had something ridiculous, like 40-something crosses in that game, was it? Or 30-something crosses in that game, and not a single goal from it. But it is their weakness, and I'm not saying cross the ball in the air all the time. Yeah, it was frustrating. And one thing I've noticed from watching and analyzing Ireland and Scotland is actually that you don't have to always cross from the wings. Something that Scotland actually does really well is crossing while inside the box, inside the 18-yard box. And I think that's maybe an approach that Armenia should adopt for this game, because we do have personnel that are capable, like Tigran Barseghyan, like Sako Adamyan, who can get on the end of those lower crosses that are inside, and or maybe do a little bit of hold-up play and create some sort of space or an opportunity for a Edos Spertian or a Vahan Mkhitaryan to come in and finish that opportunity.
If you think about it, most of our attackers are good at that. I mean, you mentioned this particular scenario. I started to remember most of our call-ups in offense are good at that. I remember this one goal from Henrikh Mkhitaryan against Georgia that was exactly like that. A back pass after a pacey run through one of the lanes, and then I started to remember one of Sako's goals. Then I started to remember all of the Vahan's goals at Vahan Mkhitaryan's goals at club level. Edward Spertian at club level. We can pull that off. If that's one idea, that's one great alternative that Armenia is more than qualified and suited to pull off.
Mm-hmm. So I think it's going to come down to this realistically. Ireland are not going to they're going to treat us similarly to how they treated playing lesser teams, and not how they played against better teams like Portugal and Belgium, which in those types of games, they sat very deep with 7 to 8 players in the box. They relied on counterattacks, and they were somewhat successful. They had a draw against Belgium, and they played a very good game against Portugal. Were unfortunate to lose 2-1. But instead, it looks like they're going to be playing with more players up top. From the looks of it, it seemed like they had a regular rotation of around 4 players, keeping the defenders busy, while the other attackers kind of made space or followed up with the high press. So what it's looking like to me is that the way Armenia is going to want to play to succeed in this match is stop the crosses, immediately get the ball up the wings where there's going to be space, and let your creative outlets do their thing. So get it out to Tico, get it out to Vahan, get it out to Edo, get it out to Barseghyan, and let them dribble through, create that space, and either make that final pass or take that shot from outside the box. And I think that's how we're going to be successful in this game.
I hope Vahan is a striker as well. I hope he's more of a winger.
That's what he's been playing lately. So I would say it's very likely.
No, I mean, for the national team, his last goal against Montenegro came not only after a long-distance shot, which apparently is one of Ireland's weaknesses in defense. Not just that, Vahan actually had a great game against Montenegro, playing at 4-9 with alongside Henrikh Mkhitaryan. So that would be a good alternative for Vahan, and it was good to see that. It was another one of Cap's good discoveries in a way. And another thing I was thinking, unrelated but not entirely, is if, say, you mentioned Henrikh Mkhitaryan in the left wing especially. Henrikh comes off a light injury, actually a set of light injuries, which is pretty much related to his age and the way he plays, which is not good for a 30-year-old, which is also, I'm going to go to another topic a little bit, but I also in time I'm mentioning more and more often that we have to start thinking about replacing Henrikh, giving him more of a secondary role, kind of what Gevor Kazarian has been doing over the last 2 years. Coming off the bench, occasionally starting, but not regularly. That should be the new role for Henrikh, and a very good alternative for a hypothetical formation against Ireland that wouldn't have a number 10. If we're to play without a number 10, I would argue for Edwards Barseghyan to play off the left wing, because we know, and this is already, there's already plenty of evidence to this, that Edo is not fit for center mid for us. Straight, either attacking mid or off the wings. Nothing more. Anything behind or up front from that 3 quarters for Edwards would be wasting one of the best talents in the Northern Hemisphere. And he has shown at Krasnodar over the last 2 years or 3 maybe that he can do wonders. He can work wonders off the left wing too.
So, gentlemen, that concludes our little preview of Ireland. Let's get a little bit of a prediction going. I know people kind of like it when we do that. I'm not saying necessarily scores, or the results, but what's your expectation from this first match against Ireland in the Nations League? Let's start with you, Chadens. What result do you expect?
A lot of shots on both teams, or not. If not a lot of shots, the shots will be equal. They're not gonna be very different from each other. I would have said as a result a draw. I mean, we're coming back after a while, and the team has to settle for a bit. So a win would be difficult, but I'm not fully ruling it out.
Okay, so you're saying it's going to be a lot of shots, but maybe a low-scoring game and very close.
Yeah, to sum it up, yeah.
Okay. What about you, Armen?
I do agree with the analysis. That is going to be an open game. It is going to be an open game. Hopefully that's what happens. Well, not hopefully, but most likely. I don't know what to hope for anymore. But I know that we're expected, maybe it doesn't happen, but I expect an open game. A lot of shots, as Chan said, and it could go miserably for us. It could go very, very bad, or it could go very, very well. It really, really depends, in my opinion, on whether or not 2 things. If Vato Haroyan is fit and he starts, which then again doesn't guarantee much because he hasn't played in months. But when he comes to the national team, especially after something as emotional as an injury, he transforms in an entirely different beast. But I am gonna gamble on this team. I've seen some good changes. I've seen some good additions. Of course, it's far from a perfect call-up, but I'm hopeful, and I think we can win this.
Sounds optimistic. I like it. Just like me. Stupidly optimistic.
No, but I'm usually the realistic one. I'm usually not precisely known for my optimism. But this time I think we can do it.
I think so too. I think it's gonna be. I totally agree with Trodden's analysis and with your analysis. I think it's gonna be what you guys exactly the Montenegro game, and I think that's how it's gonna be. So we'll see. Hopefully. Moving on to our second opponent that we will be playing in the UEFA Nations League is Scotland. Now, Scotland's a bit of a different animal for a couple of reasons. One, they are going to be playing in a World Cup qualifying playoff against our third member of our group, Ukraine, on Wednesday, and that match is going to determine who plays in the final against Wales. So it benefits Armenia if Scotland beats the Ukraine and goes on and plays in a final versus Wales, because we play Scotland twice. We play them in match day 2 and in match day 4. So
in this window.
In this window. So to us it's very beneficial, because sure, if we do have a terrible game and we lose to them, if we lose to them in the second game, we still have our fourth game, which for them is potentially a sixth game in a span of like 2 weeks or something, which is crazy. So
it's condition.
Yeah. And all their players just got off a very long season, and players like Andy Robertson, who's gearing up to play in the Champions League final. So there's a lot going on, in their neck of the woods. They haven't even thought about Armenia yet, and I think by the time they get to thinking about us, it can really, really be beneficial to us. So the way Scotland play is very direct, very quick passing, and they take a lot of shots. Who are some of their key players, Chadens, for us to look out for?
Well, the key players: Che Adams, Andy Robertson, as you mentioned, Aram, McGinn, Scott McTominay. We would have said Kieran Tierney as well, but he's left out, surprisingly. These are very, very quality players, Premier League players, elite players. They are not just key players; they are super key players.
Yeah, and even their depth is extremely noticeable. I mean, looking at their left back, like let's say, for example, they decide, you know what, Andy Robertson, you've played 3 games in a row. Let's give you a rest against Armenia. Their backup left back is this young 19-year-old, what's his name, Aaron Hickley, who actually plays for Bologna in Serie A at the age of 19. So it's like, that's a really, really good backup option to have right there, Their depth is tremendous, and they are all playing at a very good level. They're playing either in the first division in Scotland, in the Premier League, or in the Championship. That seems to be where 99% of their players end up playing. Similarly to Ireland, Scotland also deploy a 3-4-2-1, which relies a lot on wingbacks, but also not as heavily as Ireland do, because
I would say a much more balanced team. Exactly, I would say a much more balanced team when it comes to possession.
Yeah,
they're more balanced, definitely.
If we look at the statistics,
and much more lenient to taking shots from wherever in the pitch.
Yeah, there's going to be a problem.
If we look at the statistics, 59% of their shots were taken within the 18-yard box, and 32% of their shots were taken from outside the box, while only 10% were inside the goalkeeping area. So they don't try to tap the ball in. They really try to get inside the box and take a shot.
That's through the middle, especially.
Yeah, because 78% of their attacks go through the middle.
You know who it's up to?
Number. Yeah, so expect an onslaught of short crosses to the center of the box, a lot of quick snapshots, a lot of quick low shots, and they have a ton of strengths. I mean, offensively on set pieces, very, very good, because they have a lot of players that play in leagues where set pieces are crucial and is a primary way of getting goals. They'd like to take a lot of shots from the center of the box, and they love to do short crosses from inside the box. But that isn't to say that they don't have any weaknesses. Based on what we saw in the World Cup qualifying campaign, Armen, and in the Euros, what would you assess as Scotland's primary weakness?
Well, first off, one thing I noticed both when it comes to Scotland as well as Ireland, it's the set pieces. I mean, they're good. really, really good. Good would be an understatement when it comes to offensive set pieces. But then again, both Ireland and Scotland seem to be vulnerable when it comes to set pieces too. And that's actually something that happens to us, you know? So don't rule that out. We are pretty good when it comes to offensive set pieces.
The issue I think with that is, and this is one thing I've been looking forward to a lot since Lucas joined the national team. I've been looking forward to getting set pieces in danger areas, but we hardly win any.
True. Well, yeah, that's true, but maybe with a different style, because here's the thing. We have played. Think about the period when Lucas joined. Lucas joined after the whole open letter. That basically was the inflection point for the whole change in tactics and squad lists, and basically we went from an undefeated streak to a winless streak. Lucas joined for that and for after the winless streak. I think we are yet to win a game with Lucas on the pitch, so things are set to look different for us, at least when it comes to strategy. And this will be the first camp with Lucas on a new mindset, so to speak.
Yeah, but my point was that we don't draw fouls in central areas because we don't tend to play in central areas, and that's something that if you have a player that is as good as free kicks as Lucas is and as Edo is, that's something you would want to do, right? You would want a part of your strategy to be drawing fouls in those types of danger areas, so your dead ball specialists can do the things that they're really good at.
Yeah, but let's focus a little bit, 1 second, on some of the most remarkable and memorable goals we've scored over the last 2 years under Cap, right? You got Vahan against Montenegro, off the top of my head, right? You got Edward Sperțian against Romania 10 minutes after being subbed in for the first time ever for his first international game. You have Tiko Barseghyan against Iceland, Henrikh Mkhitaryan against Iceland. That's 4 nice open play goals. What else? There's a 5th one. I think, let's go with that 4, right? All those 4 goals were scored from mid to long distance, if you follow me, and off basically right before getting into the box. So the reason, I'm not mentioning the whole winless streak, because that was a different game plan. That was where everything went wrong. Armenia is supposed to play like we played in 2020, not like we played in 2021. And we have players getting to those areas of the pitch you mentioned, in 3/4 of the pitch, right before getting to the box, dangerous places. But we were, for that time frame, deadly. We were deadly. So if we are the Armenia of 2020, we're not even going to need the free kicks.
But the question is, are we going to be that? And the jury's still out on that one, and I don't know. That's
exactly.
That's the real question. I don't know.
Because that Armenia could get free kicks. The other Armenia couldn't get the ball.
Yeah, and just looking at just to turning our attention back to Scotland, they're a team that plays very hard. They seem to foul a lot, I would say. In almost all their games in the World Cup qualifiers, they had like a lot of double-digit fouls. So there seems to be very physical style of play there, which you expect because a lot of their players play in very physical leagues.
Which is good for us.
Yeah, and in games that they didn't perform as well, they still have been very good about their conversion. So we know, and it's very obvious, a team like Scotland wouldn't get to the World Cup playoffs, wouldn't have qualified for the Euros if they aren't a good team. It's fairly obvious. So despite their performance at the Euros, because they played some pretty damn good teams, we expect the Scotland to be, in my opinion, probably group winners. I think that's my anticipation. What do you guys think about that?
I agree. And
because if we're looking, go ahead.
Good Armenia, Armenia from 2020, even then could even cause an upset. Maybe not playing the most beautiful football, but that team could get results. And it's roughly the same personnel, and of course, naturally, entirely the same coaching staff from back then.
Yeah. So
I'm optimistic when it depends on the lineups, really, because the squad list has good things to be hopeful.
Yeah, and hopefully the lineup reflects that. Instead, we'll probably get Angulo and Kama left back and Barseghyan.
That's the thing.
So
it's crazy because being a 4-game window, naturally we have a 30-man squad, because that's how it is. It's not a 23, 24-man squad for a 2 or 3 game window. It's wider. So this time we get both the bad call-ups, aka the fun zone and Buchnev, etc., as well as the good call-ups,
yeah.
So it could literally be anything.
Yeah, so I mean, look,
there's space for everyone.
There's space for everyone. And maybe, Cap could take the approach of putting all the shitty players out against Scotland the first time and then saving all the good players for the second game against Scotland, where we can, take it to them at home.
So they can underestimate
on their
us.
last game, and they can underestimate us, and then we can get 3 points off them, and then we can be like, oof, okay, we're safe, That's a hope. So, boys, predictions for Scotland. For Scotland, game 1. We'll keep it to game 1 because we are hoping to do another preview after these first 2 sets of matches for the game against Ukraine and the second game against Scotland. So let's focus on first game. Chorens, how do you anticipate the first match against Scotland going?
Tough one. We're as a result, we will likely lose, but we will have a chance to manage a draw, because I don't want us to overestimate Scotland, but I also don't want to underestimate our abilities, because that first game is the most important. So if we continue if we manage well in the first game and we continue to the second game to not lose what we have, we could stand a chance against them.
Armen, what are your thoughts?
Well, I would say that right off the bat, it's most likely that we're going to lose under most scenarios, especially if we beat Ireland, because that would mean that we put ourselves out there and did our best against Ireland, which would leave our best players at least, tired and stuff, or as you said, Adam, leaves the worst set of players, so to speak, for Scotland. If we don't manage to beat Ireland, I think we would have a shot at maybe taking a draw off Scotland, but I don't see us beating Scotland either way, because their second string players are insane, as you mentioned. I mean, they are almost just as good as their first string players, and realistically better than Ireland's second string, which is why they are where they are.
Exactly, and rotation is going to be key for them, and I kind of agree with your assessment. I think the approach in this first game against Scotland, considering also that it is away, is frustrate them as much as possible. I think if you can get under their skin within the first 30 minutes of a game and if we haven't conceded by the 60th minute of the game, I think the frustration can build, and I think we can make a draw. I don't think we can beat them, at least not in this first game. I can't see it happening. But
in fact, of course, and all of this is depending on how things progress over the upcoming 2 weeks until our game against Ukraine. I would say that the team between Scotland and Ukraine, of course, the team that has a wider difference between their first string and second string players is Ukraine. If Ukraine gets into the game against us playing their second string team, we have a huge chance of getting something out of that game.
Yeah, because a lot of their players are Ukrainian based. They play for Dinamo or Shakhtar, and a lot of their first string players play outside of Ukraine. Yeah. Exactly. And our players know those players, because we have several players that play in Ukraine also. So I would be very confident against the Ukrainian second string side for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, gentlemen.
Hopefully that's the case.
That concludes this episode and our UEFA Nations League preview. As a reminder, the matches start this week. We play Ireland at home on Saturday, June 4th, followed by Scotland away Wednesday, June 8th. And then we take on Ukraine away on June 11th. That game is actually going to be in Poland. And then we come back home to take on Scotland for the second time. We will hopefully be providing a little wrap-up of the first 2 games and a preview of the second 2 games if we can, if time permits. If not, we'll probably just do a wrap-up show after all 4 matches are done. But we'll try. We'll try to do one in between, because considering it's 4 games, that's a lot. A lot of stuff to cover.
It's gonna get hectic.
It is gonna get hectic. This is the time I enjoy the most. So, any additional thoughts, Chadens, Armen, before we wrap up?
That's all we can say.
All right. Well, on behalf of everyone here, on behalf of Football Kentron, thank you for listening. If you haven't already, please share, like, go to our Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, all that jazz. We almost hit 1,000 followers on Twitter.
Stay updated with the news, our news, of course, because any single detail could change the entire Nations League camp.
Oh, I know what you're implying there, but we won't get into that.
Not just for us, but any single detail involving our rivals too.
That's true. And also, we are anticipating a new kit to be released. So hopefully that will be coming out.
We're anticipating a lot of things.
Yeah, I think by the time this show comes out, there will be a lot more clarity. So
probably,
gentlemen, thank you so much. Thank you, listeners, for listening. And this has been Football Kentron. We will be back after the game against Scotland to preview Ukraine and the second match against Scotland with hopefully, cross our fingers, 4 points. 3 points would be good enough too, honestly. Let's see what happens. The UEFA Nations League, back to competitive football. We'll see you guys in a few. Peace.